Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast, featuring David Person, owner of the world's most complete English Pokemon card collection, and Dan Norton, a longtime collector with all the knowledge behind the cards.
Dan, we're back again, and I'm going to tell you right now. I think you know this. We've had a few communications today. I'm feeling mixed emotions today, Dan, and I think we have to be honest with each other, with our audience. You know, some days are going to be better than others, but right now I'm a little down. I'm a little up, more down than up, and you might say, why? Well, why am I up, Dan? I'm up because, gosh, we're having another podcast. It's nice to see you, and I just glanced at my screen and I saw that you went over 5,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. So
Yeah.
that's tremendous, buddy. I'm very excited. I'm very happy for you. I hope that means you get paid like $5, $10 a day now, or a week, or a month. Anything is good,
month
buddy.
is closer.
Okay, month is good. We'll take that, Dan. It's got to start somewhere. The
Yeah.
snowball's got to start rolling down the hill. But Dan, at the same time, I'm a little bit down. And the reason I'm down, as I mentioned to you in a text earlier in a message, was every single time we drop a Coffee Talks podcast, I go and look at my Instagram numbers and I lose followers. Okay, that's legitimate, buddy. The last three or four, every time they drop, I've lost followers. So clearly that means something's not going right. People don't like to look at me. They like to look at my collection, but they do not like to watch me, hear me, or whatever. So what is that, Dan? What's going on? Why should I am concerned about that. I'm a human being. I have feelings. I have expectations. I want to give good into the world. And right now everybody hates me on Coffee Talk. So what should I do with that, Dan? And how can you make me feel better?
Well, what I suggested was, like, when we put this one up, just say, because this is the end of week 1, this is day 7, just put on your story that we're still going to be planning to do this every day, but you're only going to mention it on your story once a week so that people aren't getting flooded with it all the time. And then try and push people to follow the actual Coffee Talks Instagram. I think I'm going to do that as well, because I've noticed some people unfollowing or the views on the story going down because people don't want to see it every day. So I'll just mention that, and then once a week on my story, I'll put on that we're doing this every day and they should go check it out and put a link to the playlist. But the Coffee Talks Instagram, which is linked in the description of this video, it's linked on my Instagram, it's linked on Dave's Instagram. If you follow that one, that will give you the push notification or the story every day as we put up the video, and it'll give you the picture post every day as I put up the video. So if you really want to see the notifications or see when the video goes up every single day, follow the Coffee Talk Instagram, or press the bell or whatever it is here on YouTube that tells you, and me and Dave will just put it on our stories once a week.
So, Dan, your theory on this is not what I'm asking about. Your theory is that it's just a matter of inundating people with posts that say there's a Coffee Talks podcast and some kind of topic or whatever. But that's not my theory, Dan. My theory is that it's not the inundation of the posts, because the posts, we have an 8-second attention span and people roll through and they see it and they can choose to look at it or not. But my theory is that people just don't want to see me. Okay, they're done. They're done with David. I'm too old. I'm not relevant. That's the story. True
well,
or
then
not true?
you should read our comments more. It's not true. Go read our comments. The people want to see you. They do. They always talk about Uncle Dave in the comments.
Okay. All right, Dan. Thank you for clearing that up. I don't know what I'm going to do with that at all. I really don't. I'm confused about the whole thing. I've got to talk this. At least I've got a new topic for my therapy appointment this week, and so I appreciate you doing for that. Dan, I've got a new situation.
I feel bad for your therapist.
Oh my goodness.
I could not imagine being your therapist.
Okay, fine. That's fair. But at the rate I pay her, don't feel bad for her. She's doing better than you and I combined. I don't know how to say this to the public, but I've got to put it out there. And I think it's, I'm fully transparent and stuff. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, Dan. I have my first stalker. So I did want to tell everybody, it's kind of interesting, okay? She's relatively young. She's definitely attractive. She's into Pokemon. And she's been checking in with me way too often, and with friends of mine and associates, to try to determine where I'm going to be. Am I going to be going to Worlds? Am I going to be going to certain collecticons and whatever? So it's confusing. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's a little bit scary. Dan, what do you make of it? I mean, what do you do with the stalker?
I've seen your house. She's not getting anywhere near you. Doesn't matter.
That's it?
How is anyone going to get anywhere near your house without your say so, or without 50 people at the other end of some cameras knowing about it?
Well, what about events? What if I go to Worlds or something? I don't know. Do I want to be looking over my shoulder? Do I want to try to, open up the floodgate of possibilities, or do I want to walk completely away from that before it turns into something nasty and legal? And again, I'm not naming names because of my fear of legal reprisals. So, what about that, Dan? What about public events?
I'm sure you'll be fine. The only one you go to is Worlds anyway. You don't go to Collecticons or anything like that. It's only Worlds. So, and you haven't done that for the last few years, but if you go to Worlds this year, which you'd better, because it's a lot easier to buy cards when you're actually there and not playing telephone. But yeah, you'll be fine.
Okay, well, Dan, I guess we should talk about that. We should talk about Worlds. So the rumor is, and we know that certain people have already been allocated their World Spectator passes. And it
Yeah.
seems like, from what I've read, I'm not sure anything, that most of that has been the 3-day passes that are the ones that have been initially allocated.
It's all 3-day passes so far. They'll do the 3-day passes first. I'm hoping there's a couple of waves of 3-day passes, sorry, and then they'll do the single days. It's annoying because
Okay.
my wife Law got a 3-day pass. I haven't heard anything yet. So we were saying, like, do we hedge our bets on Law getting staff, or do we buy the pass? And in the end, we bought the pass, so Law has a 3-day pass. But obviously, if Law gets on staff, that doesn't really matter. If it had been like last year, where you got to buy 2 passes for you and your partner, I'd have been great and I'd have had my pass. But it's not like that anymore. So I'm still waiting. And it was a thing where when you registered interest, you filled out your details then, so you couldn't go back in and change the name and stuff after you got it, to stop people entering the lottery and then going, all right, I've got a pass, highest bidder, change the name. So we couldn't change it from Law to Dan. So if it was someone who maybe I wasn't as well known amongst Pokemon staff and Law wasn't, I could wear a badge saying Law Norton, but I don't think I'd get away with that. I think enough people there know me and know Law that we'd get kicked out.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree. I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I think for you it's a very special situation, because if she gets on staff, she will be there. She will be able to sign in. She'll be able to produce the identification to allow the transmission of the badge to her. And technically, people think if you're going through the doors back and forth, that people aren't going to check, as long as you've gone through that initial registration process. Obviously, that would be a good problem for you to have if that happens anyways, because at least you'd have some way of
Yeah.
trying to get in the venue.
Yeah.
My thanks to Steven for offering his. He got a 3-day patch, but he's not going to attend. But because of the identification process this year, it doesn't seem like we're able to avail ourselves of unless we go to a fake ID and all the rest of it, which we're not up for. So
Yeah.
so at this point in time, I'm a little concerned. I'll say the truth about that. And Dan, you suggested to me that you're hopeful that some of the players may get additional badges assigned to them, and that
Yeah.
they may then be able to put those on the, so to speak, secondary/scalping market, so we'd be able to get in. Because it would really be a disappointment not to be able to go when it's relatively close to me.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, I think this is the way it was last year. Each of the Masters Division players got 1 additional adult badge, and each of the junior and senior players got 2 adult badges in addition to their child badge. So hopefully it sticks with that, and a player is nice enough to sell us some badges. Fingers
Okay,
crossed.
good. Good. Dan, there was something before we get into today's topic. You did say that there was something that you neglected to speak about last time, or something you wanted to add on to the last video. So now's your time, buddy. Take over.
Yeah, it's just when we were talking about, which sets are going to be big, and a bit more on how we've been talking about printing to demand, which we've talked about a few times in a few different videos about Pokemon not printing to demand. It needs to be said that there are a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about resellers or scalpers here, I'm talking about a lot of collectors who only want something when it's in demand. Some of that is this marketing that we talked about, some of this is the influencers that we talked about, but some of it simply is they want something rare. They don't want a product that's everywhere. Look at 151, the sales data I gave a few episodes ago. When it was literally everywhere, when all of the shelves were stocked, no one was touching it. It's only when it became rarer again that people really started going crazy for it. And because of that, that's why we're hitting these highs and lows in terms of Pokemon meeting demand, not meeting demand. It's because as soon as Pokemon actually gets to a point where the printing is meeting the demand heavily falls because so many of those people go, "Oh, it's everywhere, rubbish set, won't hold its value, blah blah blah, I'm out." Obviously, all of the flippers and scalpers and immediate resellers are all out as soon as it's printed to meet demand. Any of the long-term investors basically get out or massively lower what they're doing when it's printed to demand because they don't think it has good long-term potential. And there's a bunch of collectors who will just not touch a set if they can buy it. There's a lot of collectors who literally have the mentality of they want it until they can have it, and then as soon as they can have it, they don't actually want it. There's so many people out there like that, and it just creates such a if you add those three groups together, it just creates such a big percentage that if Pokemon does reach the point, like I said, where they're printing to demand and the amount in the supply meets the demand, then the demand drops off sharply, like does a big drop very quickly, and then we're at a point where the supply is too much again. It's outweighing the demand, and all the shelves are stocked, and a lot of people are not touching those sets. So then Pokemon has to look again and go, are we overprinting this now because it's all on shelves, no one can sell it? And it's just a vicious cycle where if they then do scale it back to meet what is the new demand, then all of those other people jump back in and go, oh, well, this one's rare, I want this one now. And again, the demand jumps away from the supply. And I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind when you again talk about why aren't Pokemon printing to reach the demand. And it literally is, they do, but if they do, the demand goes away, and then they print to the new demand, and demand goes back up. It's just up and down. It's not a case of Pokemon just need to be printing more and more and more, because then no one will want it, other than me and you, who want every set regardless of how many other people have it.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I remember in the very first episode of our new Coffee Talks relaunch, I was talking about we want to leave people wanting more, and that's always been a strategy in sales and everything else. And so I promised at that point we do 10 to 15 minute videos, and even your wife commented today and said, you know what, it's the best 30-minute, 10-minute video I've ever sat through. So
That's this. I mean, Law will like it because that 30-minute video that's 10 minutes, that's the same 10 minutes that it takes Law to get ready when I tell her we need to leave.
Okay,
So,
good. That makes a lot of sense, and that
yeah.
would be a problem that a lot of us face. So, but yes, the idea of leave them wanting more and not overprinting is obviously kind of important in all aspects,
Yeah.
and so this will dovetail your comments into what I wanted to talk about today. And what I wanted to talk about today is, does anybody, and you just kind of alluded it to it when you said you and I are the only ones that are going to want to buy these things, are going to have to buy these things no matter what. Does anybody collect complete sets anymore? All right. So, I've been articulating for quite a while now that complete set collecting has gone by the way of the wayside. And so there's just not an interest people in doing that. Whether or not it's too many sets, whether or not it's too expensive, whether or not it's distribution rates, whether or not that it's too much for people to keep up with every single year over and over again. Whether or not it's the appeal of looking at things and maintaining sealed things, or being a lot more effective with your money from a character perspective. Maybe there's additional costs in grading things if you're a grader. Of course, I'm not, so able to save a little bit of money that way. But I really think it's made a huge difference. And I always say I feel bad for the people that go out and try to make a complete set of a new set that comes out, because either they made it for themselves or they didn't. They changed their mind later to want to sell it, or they actually made it thinking they're going to be able to sell it. And then these sets typically sit out there on eBay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stacking upon each other, because there aren't that many people looking to buy them. And so you really have to be
Until
able
you
to,
buy one.
until I buy one,
Yeah.
exactly. And I try to negotiate down because of that situation. So,
Yeah.
so I have a couple questions for number one, for folks that are out there We're going to talk about I'm going to go ahead, and we've been through this before a year ago, or whatever. But I'm going to let Dan define the difference between a set, a full, let's call it a full set, a complete set, or maybe I'll call it a regular set, a complete set, and a master set. Because I've had some real good comments on some of my Instagram posts by people that don't really understand that still. But I want to know from those that are watching, other than Craig, who I know is trying to collect complete sets, probably master sets. What do you guys do? Do any of you collect complete sets? And if so, where do you do old eras, new eras? You find it hard to go back. I mean, you look at someone like Dan, his intent would be to try to collect every single set, but as every new one comes out and he's got to work on one for him and one for lore, and then he goes back and there's still some holes in that set, and by the time you go back 6, 7, 10 sets, there's still some holes there. How do you even track all that? So for those that are watching, what do you collect? Are you a sealed collector? Are you an ETB collector? Are you a booster box collector? Do you do sets and those things? Do you not do sets? Are you a character collector? Do you just do evolutions? Are you newer to the hobby, older to the hobby? None of you are going to comment, but I'm going to ask anyways, because that's what I do. I appreciate it. We love the comments. We love the feedback. We love the interaction, so we can then comment on it. But Dan, will you talk about, the difference between our labeling of sets, so that I can, talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, so the way that me and you label stuff, I will say the only official term that Pokemon has ever used is full set. And they use that to mean one of everything you can pull from a booster pack. So every regular card, every reverse holo, every secret rare. One of everything. And Pokemon's used that at World Championships they've had as prizes sometimes. They will say you get a complete set or a full set of the last 4 expansions released, and those will come sealed in a box. It'll be a cardboard box with a sealed sticker on, and that will have full set printed on the label. So that's the only official term that Pokemon has ever used. Master set is the other term that gets used. Up until 2016, Master set was the only other term that was used. But that's the way it was. And Master set was used up until that point, always used, and as me and you use it today, literally everything. Anything with the original set logo, that's part of the master set. That's how we've defined it. It's how we've always defined it. It's a thing where master set became known as the cool thing. Like, you wanted to do a master set. If you were doing a set, you wanted to be able to say, I've got the master set. That was like the badge of honor. And people wanted to be able to say they had the master set because of the weight that holds, but they couldn't always complete the master set. And the big change came with the Evolution set, because that was the first set in a long time where the pre-release promos were part of the set as opposed to Black Star promos. So there was a Staff Charizard that was very expensive. And then later, the DCE from that set was the Internationals promo. So there were 4 different champion stamped versions. So by our definition, that master set is almost impossible, because there's 4 different cards, which there are 6 copies of in the world. To fully do what we would call a master set is basically impossible. And a lot of people have it in their minds that a master set is a thing that people should be able to finish, which I don't agree with. There's a lot of people say to me, oh, you do it because you have master sets. I don't. I think I literally have 1 complete master set from the whole of Pokemon. It's the Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Black Star promos. I believe that's the only master set I have. Lore has quite a few from, I think, HGSS through a bit of Black and White and XY. Lore has a few done, but I'm not saying it because I have them all. I absolutely don't. But the problem is, because people have different levels of what they collect, so many people have different definitions of what a master set is. Like, I've seen people literally say master set is just the full set, everything you can get from a booster pack. I've seen people then say it's variants that are worth less than $100. Like, people have literally put the block on of, oh, well, these variants go in a master set because I've got those ones, but those variants that I can't afford, those don't go in the master set.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't care what people say. I'm not
Yeah,
interested in
I'm
what
just
people say.
explaining to people why they
Yes.
would hear different terms.
Okay, but
Like,
they hear different terms. The reason why people hear different terms is because people don't know what they're talking about. And people haven't been educated like someone like you who's done this forever and knows what the terminology is supposed to be. And when you
yeah.
get into full set, even a full versus a complete set, there is this concept of a full set or I don't know which one I want to call it. So
Well,
if you're calling it
full set is an official term. Full
okay,
set is a TPCI used official term for everything in a booster pack. I never really use the term complete set. If you said to me complete set, my assumption would be one of every card plus the secret rares, but not counting the reverse hollows. That would
okay,
be what comes to my mind, but I never really use that term. And also, and to add, the people who say master set is something less than everything, they all have again different terms for what we would consider a master set. They have grandmaster set, the ultra master set, the god set. Some of them even put other tiers into it. Like I've heard, example for evolutions, they say, "Oh, the master set doesn't include the staff promos," and then someone said, "Oh, I've got the Grandmaster set of evolutions." And they said, well, someone says, "Well, you haven't got these top 8 and the champion promos." And they'll say, "Oh no, the Grandmaster set only includes the staffs. The God set then also includes the top 8 and the champions." It's just so if you're hearing those terms that people are using, it is just new terms to describe something there's already a term for, and it's master set. And if you hear me and Dave ever say it, the levels are full set and master set, and anything in between is an incomplete master set. I will also say we do not put Black Star promos as part of the master set of a set. We have Black Star promos as the Black Star promo set. I know if you've seen Dave's binders, he does put the pre-release promos into the set binder, but we would never consider that part of that set because it's still a Black Star promo. I've seen a lot of people say, especially because the ETB booklets now tells you what promos and stuff you're going to get in the blister packs if you buy the blisters for that set, or they'll tell you what the ETB promo is. Like people will say, "Oh, the Eevee card that we talked about from the Prismatic Evolutions ETB." People would say, "Oh, that's part of the Prismatic Evolutions master set," whereas myself and the way you've always said it, David, is no, that's part of the Black Star promo set. There's a Black Star promo master set for Scarlet Violet era, but we would never consider that as actual part of the set because it doesn't have the same set logo, etc.
it's interesting when I listen to you. I try not to be, I try to be the one out there that's not as opinionated, but this one really does kind of frazzle me a bit because I'm going to say it again. I heard everything you said. I'm going to assert again that there are not a lot of people doing complete set collecting. I think it's far and few between, or full set. No, I don't want to say, let me go back. Full set collecting, which is
Yeah,
an actual everything you can get from the booster boxes and including and most importantly the reverse hollows because a lot of people don't consider that and they'll just have a complete set and it doesn't have reverse hollows.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of selling that goes on in the hobby and a lot of trying to get you to buy things so people use whatever terminology they want. That's wrong. That's not okay. It's not right. It's not to make up things. It doesn't have any bearing in usage. It's just someone trying to do for their own self-serving interests. And I also think that it's very important when you buy, if you are going to ever buy a complete set, a full set, a master set, whatever it is, that you ask the seller how many cards are in there. So I have to do that every single time I'm on eBay. I have to say, well, how many cards? And they'll say, I don't want to tell you. Or they'll say, you know what, every card. And I say, great. So you don't want to sell your set to me because you don't want to take 2 minutes and go count the cards.
right.
And finally, I get a number and it's 427. Someone else is 417. Somebody else is 398, etc.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be careful about. I do want you to talk before I actually do a couple of numbers, or at least kind of give an idea of the differences between a full set and a master set numerically. I want you to talk about, Dan, real quickly, where do some of these other variant cards come from? So a variant card is a card that's actually in the set, but it doesn't look like it's in the set. It may look very similar, but it may have a stamp on it, or it may have a different holographic pattern, or it may have a different copyright date or something at the bottom. Where are these cards coming from, Dan?
A lot of them you get from certain types of blisters will have variants rather than Black Star promos. Things like they used to be theme decks, but now we have like the League Battle decks, the Trainers Toolkit, that kind of thing. Build and battle kits will often come, the pre-release kits will often come with a couple of non-hollows that would be hollow in the main set, because in a build and battle kit, the only hollow you get is your promo card. There's a huge array of places these can come from. Some of the big ones are, the Professor program. There's a lot of those out at the moment. Those are hot at the moment because there's some 151 Professor program cards that a lot of people talk about. There's these tournaments in Asia we've been looking at. I mean, there's tournaments around the rest of the world. The regionals cards, the regional staff cards, we'd see all of those. I mean, basically, anywhere you can think of that isn't a booster pack, there's a good chance it's going to have some kind of variant in there somewhere.
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate for those that are kind of new, because I know we have some new watchers, and that's kind of cool. It's kind of the card's going to look exactly the same as what's in the set from the booster
Yeah,
packs,
it's going to have
but
this
it's going
the
to have
same
some
art,
slight
same.
variants to it. Yes.
Yeah, I go the prize packs as well as another big one I should have mentioned. That's where a lot are coming from, but it will have the same set logo and the same set number, that's where it confuses a lot of people, because people who are very new, that's kind of how they're always told to identify a card, is type in the number on the bottom. Like, well, so I've got here from this is from Journey Together. So if I type in Caterpie 001/159 into Google or whatever, or any of the Pokemon searching things, that's going to give me Journey Together. That's going to tell me what the set is. But when you have the variants, I don't think Caterpie has a variant right now, but if you hit maybe if they do a Caterpie Cosmos foil or something, that's then going to be a bit more difficult to find, a bit more difficult for them to identify.
So Dan, there's one exception to all of this, which is something that you and I are more familiar with, and a lot of folks that haven't been collecting for a long, long time are not going to necessarily be familiar with.
Is this
And
that
that's
Vulpix again?
huh?
Is this that Vulpix you've been talking to me about for weeks?
No, I don't know what the Vulpix is, but the exception is going to be the code cards, which on the bottom left, you'll explain that. But they
From the EX
actually
era.
come, I've always called those variants, and technically they are not. So, how many people from the EX era, from a handful of sets then when this happened, and these additional cards with differences in the bottom came inside of the booster boxes, but people didn't know that. So, they put together a set that's 180 or 200 cards and didn't realize there's another 100 cards out there that you could have gotten from the booster box that they don't have as included in their set. Talk about that, because technically those are part of a full set. Technically, they are not variants.
It's a very weird one because they are part of the actual set. You can get them from booster packs. So I think it's about the first half of the EX era. I'd need to look at spreadsheets and stuff for actual numbers. All cards in the EX era have a 9-digit code in the bottom, a mixture of letters and numbers. For some reason, and I genuinely think no one outside of TPCI's production staff in 2003 still knows this reason, all commons can have 3 different code variations. All uncommons can have 2 different code variations. Rares and hollows only have one version. Luckily, reverse hollows only have one version. And there's something weird goes on with basic energy and sets that have basic energy, and I can't remember off the top of my head. We've got it all written down somewhere. But those come within booster packs. And the thing is, one thing that I've always wondered and have never had the money to go and buy an early EX era booster box and crack it, and definitely don't have the money to do it now because they're thousands of dollars. I've always wondered, say there's an Eevee in a set and it's got 3 different code variations. If I start opening a box and I hit an Eevee and it has a certain code, is every Eevee in that box going to have the same code? Or could I get all 3 Eevee codes from the same box? No, I don't know. And I don't know if I'll ever know, because the people who filmed themselves opening EX Sandstorm when it came out we're not recording it on high enough quality cameras for me to read the code in the bottom. And I don't think anyone now is cracking full booster boxes of early EX era. So I have no idea why they've done it. It's one of the most annoying things ever. But yeah, that's what that is. And but I'll make sure we talk about the Vulpix tomorrow. I don't want to get into that now, but I'll talk about what I meant by the Vulpix.
Okay, and I have no idea, even though you know I should, because I probably just got it in the mail and have no idea why. But somehow I forgot. But here's the thing: I do want to talk about one last thing with respect to sets and our being completionist about this. And I'm just going to allude to the numbers because I know we're going long here. There are some of these sets that between these code cards in the EX era, between just variant cards in the newer eras, there are sometimes a difference of hundreds of cards between what a full set would be and what a say the word, Dan, and what a master set would be. Yeah, so that's what I think is so interesting, and why I was so excited when the Prismatic Evolutions came out, because you've got to get master balls, and you've got to get regular balls, and you've got to get all the reverse hollows and all of the big hits and everything, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the fun of it for us and what we try to do. Yeah. The one thing I don't focus a lot on, which I just want to mention very quickly, is error cards. So some people are just going to wonder about that. If it is an error card that is something that's, kind of well known or duplicated a lot, or that kind of thing, like a Nine Tails without an HP on it or something like that, those kinds of things I typically am looking to put in the set. But I'm not like the error and miscuts and all the rest of it, the one-offs and the little ink spots and that kind of stuff. Generally not looking to do that. It's got to be a more common kind of thing, and those would be a secondary focus, and we don't really consider them very much as far as the numbers of the set. If the set has 355 cards or whatever, then it might have 5 or 6 well-known error cards we would consider kind of additionally.
Yeah, because if you start actually counting error cards, where does it end? Because obviously if we look at something like, if we look at base set, we have that Nine Tails with the missing attack damage. That's obviously a very big error card. There's the War Turtle with the War Turtle in the evolution box. That's obviously huge. Then you drop down to like the Blastoise that's missing the word stage. Like that's a bit of a printing error. It's not as drastic or crazy as especially the War Turtle, which is a design error. Then you drop to like the ink blots or the printer hickeys, and some people saying, well, this one repeats, this one that looks like a heart, there's been so many examples of Clefairy that's got this heart on it or whatever. It does get to like, where do you stop? So yeah, I know you've never looked at that.
Yeah, and I think tomorrow when you do the Vulpix, I'll also talk just a little bit about some of the very more rarest cards in the collection from the standpoint of just the variants. I'll just talk a couple of minutes about that, but I wanted to just cover this in a little more detail today because, again, some of the comments on my Instagram was like, I had no idea about the terminology and or that there were all these other cards out there. Yeah. So we do encourage you. I just want to finish up by saying a lot of this data, not all of it, but a lot of this data is on Bulbapedia. And so if you go there and you look and you try to decipher through each of the sets, you can see a lot of the different cards and what is out there. And then I think there's a piece of it that's called maybe information. If you open up that tab,
that's where the variants are.
That'll show you the great, majority of the variants. Dan has luckily some insight and some capability to be involved in the altering of that information when we find more accurate information or things.
For reference, anyone can alter it. It's a wiki page, but yes, I work with Nathan. I work pretty closely with Nathan to work out like what needs to be updated and what goes where.
Yeah. So that's a great way for people to at least get started. And then if you really get down into the weeds, then, asking for support, asking for information. If something isn't listed there, we're always glad to help with that as well. So Dan,
I think done. One last thing that needs to be said when we're talking about those code variations in the EX era is there's no one specific code that ever seems to be rarer than the rest. It's never like we look at one of them and go, oh, this one is the super rare code. It seems like all of the commons, it's a pretty even split. And because it only affects commons and uncommons, if you're trying to collect these like if you already have a run of, say, EX Sandstorm of 1 through to whatever's in Sandstorm, I think 100 or 90 something, if you already have that and you suddenly go, oh, I now need to add these extra commons and uncommons with the code variations, it's going to be cheap. There's none of these cards that are expensive. It just comes down to, the problem is finding the right one and finding the sellers willing to look through all of their stuff to get the ones that you want. I mean, if you were going into a seller and saying, hey, I want, all 3 versions of every common from Sandstorm and 2 of every uncommon, can you go through all of it, put me the sets together, and I'll buy it all? Sellers are probably more likely to do that. If you go to a seller and say, hey, I need this one code from this one common, can you go through and find it? They'll just block you on eBay most of the time because it's a 10-cent card and it's not worth it to them.
Dan, that happens every single day. That's a funny story that you're saying, and for me, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I've been spending the last couple of weeks going through every single set, trying to make sure that, because my eyes are old and because I've looked through these sets so many hundreds of times, that I haven't had an oversight and mistaken one code for another. And I have found a handful of instances, 4 or 5, where I've got a duplicate code in there and I'm missing the 3rd code, something like that. So I reach out to the seller and I say, look, it looks like the picture on the screen is not one of the 2 I need. I'm trying to collect for the most complete English language collection in the world. And it would be so helpful if there's anything you could do just to make sure it doesn't end in these codes. I never hear back. You do not hear back from anyone. And just for fun, I resend the message every single day for months at a time. And I add little ditties like, you know what? I'm on my deathbed now. This has been going on so long, and I'm an old guy, and you could really make an old guy happy if you could just look for this one card. And it doesn't matter what their feedback rating is. There's no chance they're going to do it because that doesn't exist. That level of customer service or kindness doesn't exist anymore. So Dan's 100% right, and it's kind of an interesting perspective for sure.
I will say that's because of how popular Pokemon is. They know a lot of other people are going to be buying Pokemon regardless. There's a similar thing I've kind of had with a Doctor Who game that I collect called Battles in Time, where the 1st and the 3rd set had very limited reprints with a different copyright date, but on the cards, the copyright dates are on the back. So one of them updated from 06 to 07 and one from 07 to 08. And for the most part, the sellers that I've messaged about that, saying you have a lot of Battles in Time, can you look through and try and see if you've got any of these variants? They're pretty good about it, I will say. I think that's because there's, 4 people in the world buying Battles in Time cards on a regular basis, so it's worth it for them to look through and actually sell some of the stuff.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah. Right, well, this has been the longest one so far, so let's end it here and say we'll see people tomorrow and talk about Vulpix and some set variants.
Thanks, Dan. Good to see you. Good to see all of you. Please comment. Please let us know what you're collecting, what you're not collecting, why you collect, why you don't collect, why you have no interest in collecting complete sets, etc. And if we told you anything at all that you found that was actually new information today, so we're not wasting our time. I was going to say one last thing. If you want us to talk about certain topics, put that in there as well. I think about that every single day. Why aren't folks saying, hey, make sure you guys talk about this. We're interested in this, okay? Great to see you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
And
Bye-bye.
Go follow the Koffee Talks Instagram because I will keep updating that one every day with every video. But mine and Dave's Instagrams will drop to promoting the podcast once a week. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.